Throwaway account. I'm 33M. My girlfriend is 31F. We've been together just under 2 years. Not married, no kids. But serious enough that moving in together felt like the obvious next step. Everyone told us it would be good for us. That it would make things easier, more connected, more real. I believed that. Before we moved in, our problems felt manageable. Small misunderstandings, occasional tension. Nothing that couldn't be solved by spending more time together. At least, that's what I told myself. Whenever something felt off, I blamed distance, stress, timing. Living together, I thought, would smooth the edges. The first month was fine. Almost honeymoon-like. Cooking together. Lazy Sundays. Inside jokes about how this is real adult life now. I remember feeling proud. Like we'd leveled up. Then the comments started. Nothing aggressive. Just observations. She'd point out how I loaded the dishwasher wrong. How I folded laundry inefficiently. How I left cabinets open without noticing. She'd laugh and say, "I'm just more organized than you." I laughed too. It didn't feel worth pushing back on. What I didn't realize yet was that moving in hadn't brought us closer. It had removed the space where I used to feel like myself. And once there was nowhere to retreat to, every flaw, real or imagined, had nowhere to hide. I still thought we were adjusting. I didn't know yet that I was about to learn who she really was when she had access to me all the time. At first, I told myself this was normal. Everyone argues about chores when they move in together, right? You learn each other's rhythms. You compromise. You adapt. So when she corrected how I cleaned the kitchen, or sighed when I forgot to replace the trash bag, I swallowed the irritation and adjusted. But the adjustments were one-sided. If I did something differently than she preferred, it was a problem. If she did something that bothered me, it was not a big deal. When I brought up how tense I felt in our own apartment, she said I was overthinking it, that living together meant noticing things you could ignore before. "You'll get used to it," she said, like it was a promise. The twist was how quickly our home stopped feeling neutral. I started feeling on edge the moment I unlocked the door. I'd scan the room unconsciously, with the pillows straight, the counter clean, my shoes where she liked them. It felt like preparing for an evaluation instead of coming home. She framed everything as efficiency, as standards, as wanting a functional household. If I looked hurt, she'd say, "I'm not mad, I just like things done right." Somehow, right always meant her way. One night, I joked that I felt like I was living in someone else's apartment. She didn't laugh. She said, "Well, this is what sharing a space looks like." That's when I realized something uncomfortable. Sharing usually involves give and take. This felt like training, and I was the only one expected to learn. The shift was subtle, but once it happened, I couldn't unfeel it. I stopped relaxing at home. Not consciously, my body just wouldn't let me. I'd sit on the couch, phone in hand, but instead of unwinding, I was waiting. Waiting for a comment, waiting for correction, waiting to find out what I'd done wrong. Without realizing it, I started doing things for show. Cleaning the kitchen more thoroughly than necessary. Double-checking the bathroom before she got home. Folding laundry slowly, carefully, exactly how she liked it. Not because I cared, but because it was easier than the size and the "can I just redo that?" that always followed. The twist came when I realized she didn't seem happier. No matter how much I adjusted, there was always something new, a different standard, a new expectation. If I improved in one area, her attention shifted to another. It felt like chasing a moving target, except the target wasn't improvement. It was control. One evening, I came home late from work and found her re-cleaning the kitchen. The kitchen I'd already cleaned that morning. She didn't look at me when I asked what she was doing. She just said, "I like it done a certain way." Something in me went quiet then. I wasn't being taught how to live together. I was being trained to avoid her disappointment. And that meant there was no finish line. No moment where I'd finally get it right. That night, lying in bed next to her, I realized something that scared me more than the arguments ever had. I didn't feel safe being imperfect in my own home. And once your home becomes a stage, you're no longer living there. You're performing. I didn't plan the conversation. It slipped out of me one night when I was already exhausted. She corrected how I put the groceries away. Again, and something in my chest tightened instead of shrinking like it usually did. I told her I felt like nothing I did was ever good enough. I said it calmly, even apologetically, like I was asking permission to feel that way. She looked genuinely surprised. Then she laughed a little and said, "You're taking this way too personally." She told me she wasn't criticizing me, just the way things were done. That I should be grateful she cared enough to keep things nice. The way she said it made me feel childish for bringing it up at all. That was a twist. The moment I finally spoke, the problem became my reaction, not her behavior. She asked why I was suddenly so sensitive, if something was going on at work, if I was stressed, anything but the possibility that she might be hurting me. By the end of the conversation, I was reassuring her that everything was fine, that I just had a long day. Later, alone in the shower, I replayed it over and over. I realized I hadn't actually been heard. My feelings had been reclassified as overreaction and filed away. That night, I understood something important. If you can't bring up discomfort without being made to feel wrong for feeling it, the relationship isn't as safe as you think. I went to bed knowing I had crossed an invisible line, not by speaking up, but by noticing how quickly my voice was dismissed. After that conversation, I noticed how often she used the word standards. It became her catch-all explanation for everything. If I forgot something, it was because my standards were low. If I relaxed on the weekend instead of cleaning, it was because I didn't take pride in our home. The word sounded neutral, even respectable, but it carried a sharp edge. The twist was how she positioned herself as the authority on what was acceptable. She didn't say, "This bothers me." She said, "This isn't how adults do things." That framing hurt in a way I couldn't easily argue with. It wasn't about preference anymore. It was about character. I started feeling embarrassed in my own space. If friends came over, I'd panic beforehand, worried she'd point out what I'd missed after they left. And she did, always quietly, always framed as improvement. "Next time, let's make sure it's cleaner. Even though I was the only one being corrected. One night, I asked her what she thought I did well around the apartment. She paused longer than I expected, then said, "You try." She meant it kindly, I think, but the word landed heavy. Try implied effort without competence. That was the moment I realized something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was a project, a before and after she was still working on. And the scariest part wasn't that she saw me that way. It was that I'd started to see myself through the same lens. The change didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, quiet, almost polite. I stopped doing things the way I naturally would and started doing them the way I thought would avoid commentary. I'd hesitate before sitting down, scanning the room for something I might have missed. If I couldn't find anything wrong, I felt uneasy anyway, like I just hadn't seen it yet. The twist was how little she had to say anymore. I was preempting her, fixing things before she noticed, apologizing before she commented. I'd catch myself saying sorry for things that didn't actually matter, leaving a glass on the table, forgetting to close a drawer. She'd nod, accept it, move on. The system was working. For her. For me. Something was eroding. I felt smaller, quieter, less sure of myself. Decisions that used to feel automatic now required mental approval. Even when she wasn't home, I acted as if she was. Her standards had become the invisible ruler I measure myself against. One night, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I just relaxed in my own space. I was always on, always adjusting, always braced for correction. Home had become a place where I performed competence instead of living. That realization scared me more than any argument we'd had, because I wasn't being controlled through force or threats. I was being shaped through constant, low-level disapproval. And the worst part? It was working. The moment came on a Saturday morning. Nothing dramatic. I woke up before her, made coffee, and sat on the couch scrolling my phone. I felt relaxed for maybe 30 seconds, until I heard her moving in the bedroom. My body reacted before my mind did. I stood up automatically and started tidying, heart rate ticking up like I was late for something important. That's when it hit me. I wasn't afraid of making a mess. I was afraid of being seen doing nothing. The twist was realizing how deep it went. It wasn't just chores anymore. It was me, the way I talked, the way I laughed, the way I existed in space. I'd started editing myself constantly, sanding down anything that might invite commentary. I wasn't showing up as a partner. I was presenting a version of myself designed to pass inspection. Later that day, she made an offhand comment about how I'd spent the morning. Not angry, just observant. You could have been more productive. She said casually, like stating the weather, and instead of feeling annoyed, I felt ashamed, as if I'd failed some unspoken test. That scared me, because shame had replaced anger. And when anger disappears, so does resistance. I wasn't pushing back anymore. I was complying before being asked. That night, lying in bed, I asked myself a question that felt dangerous. If I'm this afraid to be myself now, what will I look like in 5 years? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I didn't want to find out the hard way. I noticed it one evening when she was out late. I was alone in the apartment, sitting exactly how I wanted, doing exactly what I wanted, and still felt tense. That's when I realized the feeling wasn't tied to her presence anymore. It had moved inside me. The twist was understanding that even when she wasn't there, I was still living by her rules. I caught myself getting up to straighten things that didn't need fixing, replaying the day in my head, anticipating comments she hadn't made yet, practicing explanations for choices no one had questioned. The apartment was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a set of expectations I carried around. When she came back, she commented on something minor. A towel hung wrong. I nodded and fixed it immediately. No argument. No irritation. Just reflex. And in that moment, I saw how complete the transformation was. I didn't even feel wronged anymore. I felt trained. That realization hit harder than any criticism ever had, because control you can see is easier to resist. Control that rewires your instincts feels like normal, and once it feels normal, you stop questioning it. Later that night, she said, "I like how much better you've gotten at keeping things together." She meant it as praise. I smiled, said thanks, and felt hollow. Better according to whose definition? That's when I finally admitted something I'd been avoiding. I didn't feel like I lived with her. I felt like I lived under her standards. And no matter how quiet the apartment was, it didn't feel like mine anymore. The comment itself was small. Almost nothing. That's what makes it hard to explain why it mattered so much. We were having dinner, takeout, because I was tired and didn't feel like cooking. I cleaned up afterward, wiped the counters, put everything away. Not perfectly, maybe, but well enough. She walked into the kitchen, looked around, and said, "You know, if you just stay consistent, this wouldn't feel so exhausting." She wasn't angry. She wasn't even critical in her tone. She sounded tired of me. And that's when something inside me finally snapped, not outwardly, but inwardly. I realized she wasn't stressed because of mess or disorder. She was stressed because I wasn't becoming what she expected fast enough. The problem wasn't what I did. It was who I was when I did it. The twist came when I noticed my reaction. I didn't feel shame. I didn't rush to apologize. I felt clarity. For the first time in months, her words didn't sink into me. They bounced off. I saw the pattern all at once. The moving standards, the constant corrections. The way improvement was never enough because enough would mean letting go of control. And I understood that no version of me would ever fully pass this test because the test itself depended on my failure. That night, I didn't clean anything extra. I didn't explain myself. I went to bed feeling strangely calm because I finally understood something crucial. The problem wasn't that I couldn't live up to her standards. It was that her standards required me to disappear. After that night, I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to announce it. I wasn't going to frame it as a boundary talk or a turning point. I just stopped trying to earn peace. I cleaned when I felt like it. I rested when I was tired. I left things imperfect on purpose, just to see what would happen. She noticed immediately. The apartment didn't fall apart. Nothing dramatic changed, but her mood did. She became sharper, more restless. Comments that used to be disguised as standards turned into sighs and pointed silences. She'd re-clean something I'd already done, making sure I saw it. When I didn't react, she asked if I was okay, like my calm was the real problem. That was the twist. My lack of anxiety unsettled her. One evening, she asked why I'd stopped caring. I told her I hadn't. I just didn't want to feel on edge in my own home anymore. She stared at me like I'd said something unreasonable. Then she said, "That's just what adulthood is." For the first time, I didn't accept that definition. I realized how much energy I'd spent trying to meet an invisible standard that kept moving. How peace had always been conditional, available only when I performed correctly. And how exhausting it was to live like that. That night, lying in bed, I felt something unfamiliar but grounding. Anger. Not explosive, not reckless. Clean anger. The kind that shows up when you finally understand you've been asking the wrong question. I wasn't failing at living together. I was failing at being controlled quietly. And once I saw that, I knew I couldn't unsee it. The next argument was the first one in months that felt real. Not polite, not muted, not wrapped in standards or concern. It happened because I left a few things undone and didn't rush to fix them when she noticed. I could feel it building all evening. The tension, the sighs, the way she kept rearranging things just a little louder than necessary. Finally, she said, "Do you even care anymore?" That question used to scare me. This time it didn't. I told her I cared, but I was done feeling like I had to earn the right to relax. I said I felt constantly judged in my own home. The words came out steadier than I expected. She didn't interrupt. She waited, then said, "I just expect more from an adult partner." That was a twist. No denial, no confusion, just confirmation. I asked her if she liked me, or just the idea of who I could become if she kept correcting me. That question landed harder than anything else I'd said. She went quiet, eyes narrowing, like she was weighing how honest she wanted to be. She told me she didn't want to lower her standards just to make me comfortable. And suddenly it was clear. My discomfort wasn't a side effect. It was the cost of admission. For the first time, I didn't try to negotiate that cost. I realized that any peace built on constant self-erasure isn't peace at all. It's obedience. After that argument, the apartment felt different. Not tense, exposed. Like something essential had finally been said out loud. And now it was just sitting there between us. She moved through the space with the same confidence as always, but I felt oddly detached, like I was watching a relationship instead of standing inside it. The twist came when I realized she wasn't upset. She wasn't reflective. She wasn't reconsidering anything. She genuinely believed she was right. That scared me more than anger would have, because it meant there was no misunderstanding to clear up, no middle ground we hadn't found yet. Her standards weren't a phase or a reaction to stress. They were the foundation, and I was expected to adjust indefinitely. Over the next few days, I noticed how easily she slipped back into correction mode, like the argument had never happened. A comment here, a look there, a re-cleaned surface. It wasn't malicious. It was automatic, which told me everything I needed to know. I stopped feeling defensive and started feeling tired, bone tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes when you realize you've been fighting gravity the whole time. I wasn't resisting her anymore. I was finally accepting the shape of the situation. One night, I caught myself imagining what it would feel like to live alone again. Not lonely, quiet. A place where nothing needed to be justified. Where doing things imperfectly didn't come with consequences. That's when the thought landed fully formed, without panic or drama. This isn't a rough patch. This is a relationship. And once I saw it that clearly, I knew the next question wasn't how to fix it. It was how long I was willing to stay inside it. Once the thought this is a relationship settled in, it didn't go away. It followed me through the day, through work, through mundane tasks. Not like a siren, more like a steady hum in the background, impossible to ignore. I wasn't fantasizing about leaving her. I was imagining what it would feel like to exist without constant evaluation. That was a twist. The future I pictured wasn't exciting or dramatic. It was quiet, Simple. Me coming home and sitting down without scanning the room. Cooking a meal without bracing for commentary. Leaving a mug in the sink overnight and not feeling like I'd failed a test. The absence of tension felt more appealing than any version of working on us ever had. I noticed how different I felt outside the apartment. Lighter. More myself. I laughed more easily with friends. I didn't overthink my words. And every time I came back home, that ease evaporated. The contrast became impossible to rationalize away. One evening, she asked what I was thinking about. I almost told her the truth, that I was imagining a life where I wasn't constantly being corrected. Instead, I said I was tired. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to what she was doing. That moment clarified something painful. Even if I explained all of this perfectly, it wouldn't change what she needed from a partner. She didn't want someone at peace. She wanted someone adjustable. And I was running out of parts of myself left to bend. I knew the conversation was coming long before I was ready to have it. It sat in my chest every time I unlocked the door, every time I heard her sigh at something minor, every time I felt myself tense for no reason at all. Avoiding it didn't make it smaller. It just made everything else heavier. One night, after dinner, I told her I wasn't happy living like this. I didn't accuse. I didn't list examples. I just said I felt constantly judged in my own home and that it was wearing me down. I expected defensiveness. Maybe tears. Something human. What I got was a measured response. She said she didn't understand why I was framing her standards as an attack. That she'd always been this way. That if I felt uncomfortable, maybe we just weren't compatible in how we lived. The way she said it was calm, almost logical, like she'd already accepted that possibility. That was a twist. There was no shock, no urgency to fix things, no fear of losing me. Just acceptance that this was who she was, and this was what she expected. And suddenly, I saw the conversation for what it really was. Not a negotiation, a clarification. I asked her if she ever felt like she needed to change for me. She thought about it, then said, "Not really." That answer landed harder than any criticism ever had, because it confirmed what I'd been slowly realizing all along. The effort had only ever flowed one way, and no amount of trying on my part was going to turn this into a place where I felt safe to just be myself. I moved out 2 weeks later, not in a rush, not in secret, just quietly, deliberately, like someone finally acknowledging what they already knew. We talked logistics. Who would keep what? When I'd come back for the rest of my things, the conversations were calm, almost businesslike. That calm told me more than any argument ever could. There was no begging, no promises to change, no sudden realization on her part that she'd gone too far. She told me she hoped I'd find a place that suited me better. I believe she meant it, and in a strange way, that hurt more than if she'd fought for me. It confirmed that she didn't see anything wrong with how things had been. The first night alone in my new place, I sat on the floor with a takeout container and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Ease. Not happiness exactly, relief. I left dishes in the sink. I didn't fix the pillows. I didn't scan the room. Nothing happened. The silence was gentle. Here's what I learned. Living together doesn't fix problems. It magnifies them. And love that requires you to constantly perform, improve, and adjust will eventually teach you to disappear. If you're reading this and your home feels like a place where you're always bracing yourself, pay attention. Home shouldn't feel like a test you're failing. Walking away didn't mean I gave up on the relationship. It meant I finally chose to live somewhere I could breathe,